one quick note I want to make is that
Sure.
I don't think that history repeats itself, but it rhymes.
Yes.
So
Mhm.
we'll see something similar as how things were, but there's going to be a new spin on it.
Right.
And that's in my opinion what rebellion will look like.
Mhm.
Um, and how we address these issues. Oh man, I mean, one of the biggest disparities I see is family courts.
Yes.
Like, especially in the state I live in, it's slowly changing, but just automatically siding with the woman.
What is up, everybody? My name is Kyle Matovcik. I am the host of the In Liberty and Health podcast, where we talk all things liberty, health, and wellness, and beyond. My hope is to encourage and spread the message of liberty and physical and mental well-being. I hope you enjoy all the topics we talk about with our guests. We're on all major streaming platforms, so please sit back, relax, and enjoy.
Man, I'm doing as good as anyone can do getting buried by his 13-year-old son on leg day.
I'm not going to apologize for not being on this podcast because I got to go see Metallica. So if that's a problem, kiss my ass. Okay? All right.
All right, everybody, this is In Liberty and Health, episode number 162. I've been looking forward to this conversation since I was on his show. I'm a fan of his show, and hopefully he's a fan of mine, and hopefully, we put out something good together, and hopefully everybody checks out his show and subscribes. I got Jacob from Rise to Liberty with me today. How you doing, dude?
Not too bad. Just hanging out, waiting for this. This is pretty much all I have to do today, which is wonderful for once.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know how we're gonna sound like old people now, but how the weather is out your way. Last night my wife and I went to go look at Christmas lights, and I fucking ran my car into the side of a hill. And perhaps that's what I get for stirring up a Twitter shitstorm. But at the same time, we still had a good night, and we didn't get home until super late. So it's snowy here in Pennsylvania. How is it out in Utah?
Snowy, and cold, like freezing cold.
Yeah.
Clear skies, and so there's nothing to keep any heat in.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's been like 6 degrees.
Oh, yeah. I'd be pissed. I'd be hanging in the house too. I normally get up and go to the gym. I'm normally at the gym, usually anywhere from like 5:30 to 6 on Sundays. And today I just kind of stayed in, slept, because I'm like, look, if I leave right now, I fucking ran my car into a hill. I'm not going to go sliding around. I'll wait till they kind of clean shit up.
Yeah.
So, anyways. I guess let's do the usual libertarian podcast thing. What made you a libertarian, and kind of lay out your story of how you got to where you are today?
Well, the first thing, two simple words, is Ron Paul, of course. So I'm definitely a Ron Paul libertarian. Oddly enough, back when I used to be a scumbag in high school, I was flipping through a High Times magazine, and I found a advertisement for Ron Paul's 2008 campaign. Mm-hmm. And it was a politician who supported the full legalization and decriminalization of marijuana, which I thought was political suicide. I was like, that is insane. Well, I wasn't old enough to vote 2008, but 2012 came around. He was running again. I paid attention. Other than that, what really woke me up was actually G. Edward Griffin's Creature from Jekyll Island. Mm. As soon as I found out that money's all bullshit, that was it. It was all downhill from there. Mm. And then, just paying attention to Ron Paul, G. Edward Griffin, it kind of led me down the winding road to eventually being a libertarian. Republicans always just pissed me off. They were warmongering. Never followed through with what they said. Democrats just always seemed crazy to me, and so I just landed libertarian.
Nice. Yeah, that kind of seems to be the story for a lot of people. We were shooting the shit a little bit off air about how not enough people listen to Stefan Molyneux, but that was actually largely my introduction, because my older brother used to consider himself a crazy liberal, and much like you, when my brother was in this kind of crazy liberal phase, and he had introduced me, or that just the whole appeal of liberalism and the way that like they would talk about stuff just always kind of rubbed me the wrong way. But I'm like
Oh,
a
yeah.
14, 15-year-old kid. I don't know shit about any of that. So did you hear like some of the stuff my brother used to listen to, be like The Amazing Atheist, who was like good on men's issues, but like everything else he sucked. And then like the Young Turks were like the two big things. So like, what was your exposure to the left, and why did you reject that?
So, I mean, I'll admit I definitely came from more of a biased side.
Sure.
So my grandparents were John Birch Society members,
Mhm.
and just like pure anti-communist. And then as I got older, I actually just had to learn about it. I have integrity. I want to know exactly what I'm saying that I don't like.
Mhm.
So I just read the Communist Manifesto after high school, and kind of just listened to what Democrats say. I mean, the interesting thing about liberals is they tell you exactly what they're about if you listen.
Mhm.
You know, so it wasn't hard. I listened to the Young Turks. The Young Turks definitely drove me crazy. Like Chang, just Google it. Just Google
Of
it.
course.
It just makes so much sense. Like, it's just ridiculous, the whole thing. And then it never made sense to me.
Mhm.
Just the starting position where they came from, and then the follow through. The follow through is always where they get me.
Mhm.
Like, I would listen to Bernie Sanders, and like his criticisms are pretty decent, and then his follow through is just like where he loses me. And it's like, big corporations and all this stuff is bad, and big government spending, and then so we need more government. And then I'm like, what the fuck? That doesn't make sense at all.
Yeah. So, how would you describe where you grew up? Because you said that your grandparents were like fervently anti-communist, which is obviously from our perspective a good thing. But I feel like today, and we talked about this a little bit on your show, was that you don't want to go necessarily too far one way or the other. And that's not to say you should always fall right in the middle. But when you start getting down this like McCarthyist route of there's a communist underneath your bed, as I think even some libertarians kind of think, I feel like you get a little bit too far off in the woods, and then you become what you sought out to kind of be against and destroy. So
Yeah.
I know it's a little bit of a long tangent, but what was like your community like and the surroundings for you?
Well, first of all, I'd like to say that communists aren't people; they're government property. No, that's a half joke, but
Three quarters
yeah, exactly.
distributed evenly.
Exactly. Amongst each other for the greater good. So, I mean, my community was all middle class, I would say. I've always been somewhere in between lower middle class and higher middle class, just right in there. I was raised a white kid in suburbia, but then lived through the 2008 crash, or big bank theft, basically. And I mean, it was good, just middle class for the most part. Blue collar, lots of blue collar work. Raised on a farm and a farm ranch, so that's just kind of the background I came from. Really hardworking, blue collar American. And then grew up a little bit and got into music, and then it was all downhill, for a long time. Hit the rebellion streak really hard, like we were talking about earlier. Came from a single mother household, and my mother's a saint, love her to death. Closer to her now than I've ever been, and yeah, it was just typical American upbringing. I had just enough daddy issues to not be a complete piece of shit, but get into angry music.
Yeah, man. And that kind of, I feel that my kind of in my former years, in like my early to late teens, that I was in a lot of the same kind of stuff. But that's interesting that you said you kind of grew up on a farm. But something that I enjoy talking to people about is this kind of idea of the blue collar work and like an honest day's pay in a way. I had started working when I was 15 years old at a McDonald's because there was one like couple blocks away from me that I could walk to. And I remember always being annoyed with the people who would kind of stick their nose up at people like in middle school and high school who would go to work for fast food and they say, oh, well, I don't want that job because I'm above that. It's like, okay, well, do you want money or not? Well, yeah, I want a paycheck. Okay, so how far are you willing to go to get that paycheck? For me, there wasn't anything low enough for me that I wouldn't do to earn money. Yeah. Well, that actually sounds bad. Not but everybody knows what I mean, right? I would go work at McDonald's. Reason. You're right. I'd go work at McDonald's for $7.25 an hour to make a paycheck. So that really stuck with me. And then when I went to the automotive field, I started working in a dealership for literally the same amount of money. I was changing oil and rotating 100-pound tires for $7.25 an hour. Do you feel like that work experience in your youth, being raised on a farm, kind of transferred over into your career life and also personal life?
Oh, most definitely. So like one of the first jobs I actually had, I was a lifeguard when I was 16.
Okay. Yeah.
And let me tell you, when you're 16, being a lifeguard, being able to check out chicks in bikinis all day, dude, hands down. And I was getting paid. So it was actually at an amusement park that we have here, the only one we have here. It's called Lagoon Amusement Park.
Yeah.
Or Adventure Park. I don't know, whatever the fuck. The lifeguards get paid the most out of any other department, rides, concessions, whatever. And so I was always walking around the park like I was the shit. You know, I was bronze, I was good looking and everything, and got to check out chicks all day. It was great. Not until later, actually, I started working on a farm independently, you know, by my own volition. Mm-hmm. As a little kid, of course, I would help out on the ranch, but it never really sunk in what I was doing or how important it was. Started working on a local farm here, of a vegetable farm that had a harvest festival every year. Do hay rides, pumpkin patches. Had a haunted house and everything. Started in the haunted house, and then I worked my way to just doing farm work, and worked there about 8 years, I think, until it became not profitable. You know, thanks big government. It was honestly the most rewarding work I've ever had. And it is easily carried over into everything else. I was raised with the do it right or don't do it at all attitude. So do it right the first time. And that's pretty much how I do everything.
Yeah. One thing, and I'm sure you probably feel this as well. When I was working for $7.25 an hour, I was always I was resentful initially about the people who really treated me really, really poorly. But then as the years kind of went by, I realized, oh, I got my balls shattered because they wanted me to be a better person. And, so, you know, the younger people that now I pretty much get to teach, they don't always understand that. But I like want to get in their brains and just tell them, like, look, this is for your own good. Like the boomers and all the people that I'm sure you grew up around with just as I did, a lot of the time they really did have our best interests at hearts. Now, when we talk political stuff, we may not always agree, but like when it came to an honest day's work, they really wanted that kind of lesson imparted upon us. And I really think that does, you know, vibe well with not only libertarianism, but also kind of like this greater idea of maintaining freedom and a culture that's going to tolerate the responsibilities that come with that.
Yeah, it's independence. And yeah, I got my balls busted a lot. And anytime I fucked up, which I was young and dumb, so it was a lot. I got my ass handed to me, rightfully so. And you know, so coming from a single mother home, I actually had to surround myself with you know, strong male role models. I had to choose my role models. It actually worked out well in my case. You know, it doesn't always for everyone, but you know, in my case it did. I was smart enough, and I don't know, wise enough, oddly, you know, for being a dumb teenager. But yeah, I always had my ass handed to me when I screwed up, but it wasn't always just you're in trouble for the sake of being in trouble.
Right.
It was always you're in trouble, but you need to understand why.
Mm-hmm.
And I always had that. And then it was, reinforced by my mother. So learned a lot of hard lessons, but it was all my doing.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm glad I learned them. So it's interesting when you are on the bottom. Obviously there are those people that have every intention of treating you badly just because.
Right.
Usually those are management people, that never go anywhere. They just stay at management, probably still working management.
Yeah. The bean counters.
Yeah, exactly. But really a lot of it is internalized too. Because of course you make the final decision. How am I going to take this? Am I just going to say fuck you and walk off, or am I actually going to do something about this? And at the time I didn't know what I was doing, but I'm here now. So
what's up, everybody? We're going to take a quick break and tell you about the show's sponsors. We are brought to you by LMNT electrolytes. I've been using this stuff for years, and what I've honestly found is that if I didn't have electrolytes before some kind of cardio, and sometimes even before workouts, that my workout performance, or definitely cardio performance, would suffer greatly. Sodium is responsible for every single movement pretty much in your entire body, and let's say you drink a lot of caffeine like I like to do, then maybe it is a good idea, like I do every single morning, put some LMNT chocolate electrolytes there in your coffee to get a little bit more sodium, potassium, and magnesium in your coffee, so that way whatever diuretic effect you get from the caffeine is pretty much diluted by the fact that you put chocolate salt in it. Also, it tastes really, really good. Get some chocolate cream or hazelnut cream or even coconut, and mix that all up. It tastes really, really good. So make sure you drop by, go to drinklmnt.com/inlibertyandhealth and pick you up some electrolytes today. All right, guys, thanks.
Yeah, so kind of pivoting back to a little bit more your youth. When I was on your show, I believe you had a Cannibal Corpse hoodie on. So something that I enjoy talking to fellow, kind of metal and heavy music travelers about is like, what kind of got you into heavier music, and what was like your first concert? Because for me, my first concert was Gwar, Lamb of God, and Job for a Cowboy.
nice.
And I mean, I loved heavy music for years before that, but I'll never forget like just the totality of walking into an outdoor area where there's loud music. Like I could still see this, just walking around the fence and seeing a band playing on stage and feeling it just rock the concrete beneath me. Did you have any kind of moments like that? And then obviously, how did you get into the heavier stuff? And like, what's just kind of your experience with metal?
Oh, so I mean, my first concert. Well, let's see. Let's back up a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
So, my sister's a child of the '80s.
Mm-hmm.
My dad's not too much older. It's like 7 years older.
Mm-hmm.
She has a different dad, so we're half siblings.
Sure.
But so my sister was always listening to just metal,
Mm-hmm.
all kinds of Motley Crue, Pantera, Judas Priest, all these things.
Mm-hmm.
The first metal album I ever got given was Judas Priest, British Steel.
Oh, yeah.
And I was like 8 years old, and my dad handed it to me and said, "You want to listen to something heavy? Listen to this." And I was like, "Whoa!" And it took me back. I was like mesmerized by the fingers and the razor blade on the cover,
Mm-hmm.
and I was hooked. But then that was pretty much my exposure, was just listening to what my parents listened to.
Mm-hmm.
And then fast forward, my first concert was actually Kiss and Aerosmith when I was 12.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Sister took me to my first concert, and then it sparked everything. Kiss is a money grab, so it felt like that. They heard and got off the stage, did the blood, did the smoking guitar, got off stage.
Yeah.
But Aerosmith fucking destroyed it.
Wow.
Like, I will always go see Aerosmith if I ever get a chance.
Yeah.
Then when I was 13, Well, in between 12 and 13, I had just started getting into music on my own. And of course, I had listened to, what my parents listened to, but then my cousin had showed me Good Charlotte,
Mhm.
which at the time I was like, what is this?
Yeah.
Like angsty pop punk.
Mhm.
And then met up with some friends at school after I had started exploring some music. And then I went to my first local show when I was 13.
Mhm.
Um, actually went to the show, was standing on the edge of the mosh pit. Somebody did a spin kick, kicked me in the back of the head.
Ooh.
My head bounced off the floor and ended up going to the hospital getting stitches.
And you became a libertarian.
Yeah, exactly. Started with a head injury at a metal show. So yeah, after that, I was hooked. The club owner ended up giving me free tickets to a Scary Kids Scaring Kids concert, and I was hooked. I went every single weekend.
Yeah, dude, there was something about those local shows as a kid. We had a place called Roundhouse up here, where I'm from, which is like Natrona Heights, Pennsylvania. This is a little pizza shop, and man, all these hardcore bands would come through, and it was just like there's something exhilarating in the air, and I'm sure you could resonate with that, especially getting kicked in the head.
Yeah,
yeah.
It's unlike anything else, and I haven't experienced anything like that since.
Mhm.
Unfortunately, all of the local clubs, all age venues and stuff had closed down in my immediate area. There's still some down in Salt Lake.
Mhm.
But yeah, there's nothing quite like the music scene that was. And I mean, I got introduced to just all kinds of different bands, and of course started playing in a band myself.
Mhm.
It was like my whole world at one point. And then as I got older, I just got into heavier and heavier music, found the groove in which I like. I like first and second wave of British heavy metal. My favorite band without a doubt's Motorhead.
Okay. Yeah.
We are Motorhead. We play rock and roll.
Mhm.
And I mean, other than that, of course, the Acacia Strain, of course, recently, like Lorna Shore, just been just destroying it. Thy Art is Murder. So I've kind of got these both like old school, like wanting to listen to Diamond Head, old school Metallica, and then on the other side want to just listen to the most degen like demonic stuff possible.
Yeah.
So just kind of all over the place, honestly.
Yeah, dude, I kind of miss, and I feel like a lot of music doesn't have this today, but like you listen to like old Motorhead, or specifically, I always think of Pantera, and people will hate that I say this, but I will always believe Pantera was the best band to ever walk the face of the earth, because just like watching the video of them playing in Russia, it was like, dude, who could top that? Just the raw fucking power of a 4-piece, no less.
Yeah.
Just this, we are fucking Pantera from 1990 to 2003. Just the fucking kick in the gut that they didn't care what anybody else did, and that propelled them to the top. There's something to be said about that. But Motorhead was kind of the same deal, where it was Lemmy is Lemmy, and that's it.
Yep.
So did you get to see Motorhead?
I did.
Okay, yeah.
Got to see them a handful of times.
Nice.
Still the loudest band I've ever seen, ever, without a doubt.
Mhm.
And they always started loud, and then somehow they always ended up playing louder.
Mhm.
Always. Like halfway through the set, they would just crank it up to 11, and dude, it was insane.
Mhm.
Last time I saw him right when Lemmy was getting sick. And they came to Salt Lake, paid $30, watched them play 3 songs, and then they called the show. Lemmy wasn't feeling good, and that was the 3 best songs ever.
Was it a Mayhem Festival in, what was that, 2012?
So one of the first times I saw him was actually Mayhem Festival, I think.
Yeah.
And it was like Slipknot, Anthrax, Slayer, Motorhead.
Yeah.
Like it was just like an amazing lineup.
Mm.
Um, but the last time I saw him, it was actually just a Motorhead tour. So
Okay. Wow. And they called
yeah,
it 3 songs.
yeah, he just felt like shit. Lemmy came out, played one song, and then played the second song. They took a break,
Mm.
and then he came back out, played another, and then ended up taking a break, and he just never came back out. So it was like 3 weeks, 4 weeks before he passed.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So
Wow. Yeah, dude, that sucks because you know, he was just brazenly Lemmy. Like there was
oh
nobody
yeah.
else who had like the personality of him. It kind of reminds me, I saw Huntress and their singer Jill Janis committed suicide, and I actually met her, and she was talking about Lemmy on stage. So that's kind of what prompted me to kind of go down this rabbit hole a little bit. But yeah, it was they were great, and I only seen Motorhead once, and that was at Mayhem Festival. But I just feel like a lot of music today doesn't have that same kind of soul. And I
Yeah.
think we talked about this a little bit on your show as well, is that what Dime was talking about in this one video is just like the little squeaks or the little imperfections are sometimes what makes the music's so great, and a lot of that's removed where like you could probably hear the imperfections or like the rasp of Lemmy's voice
Yeah.
back in the day, where a lot of singers don't necessarily have that same grace today.
Well, it's everything's overproduced,
Mm-hmm.
you know. Like that's what I don't like about a lot of late 90s and early 2000s death metal.
Mm-hmm.
It all started sounding the same. It was all
Yeah.
repetitive. And it's like, how many blast beats can you handle, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And don't get me wrong, I love blast beats, but you know, I need something else.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I don't know. It's interesting, um, especially now because there's a lot of sampling and everything seems a little too artificial.
Mm-hmm.
And there's very few bands now that can pull the genuine rock out
Yeah.
and just be them and their instruments. There is one band, highly recommend anyone who loves rock and roll. They're called Mothership. It's a 3-piece band out of Texas. Just it's just pure rock and roll, man.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like one of the best times ever, and they sound large, you know. And for being a 3-piece, it's just crazy. But they like 2 of them are brothers, and they grew up with their drummer, and so they just have this connection that most people don't. So highly recommend that band to anyone.
Yeah, I'll have to check them out. Also talking about Motorhead, do you listen to Phil Campbell and the Bastard Sons?
I have, and I like it.
Mm-hmm.
They're okay. It's just they're on my playlist, but it's not something that I seek out.
No, I got you. Yeah, I heard of them because I think I was listening to like a playlist with Jared James Nichols on it, and he's more of like a blues rock finger picking guitar player, and he's insanely fucking good. And then they kept coming up. I'm like, man, these guys fucking kick ass. And then when I finally looked into it, I'm like, oh well, Phil Campbell, that explains it then.
Yeah.
So for me, I kind of really cut my teeth on like the 2001 to like 2000, I would say like 9 at the latest, new wave of American heavy metal. What were your thoughts on kind of like the metalcore then, like the Trivium, Lamb of God, God Forbid, Shadows Fall, bands like that? How did you feel about that? Because it seems like you and I kind of came from the same place.
Oh yeah. So I mean, my first like underground band that I found was As I Lay Dying, which I still love to this day.
Yeah.
Like Tim tried to murder his wife, and that sucks. But I still love the band, especially that first album where they started getting notoriety. Killswitch Engage was always huge.
Yeah.
Love them. Killswitch Engage with Howard is just unmatched in my opinion. Probably the best band out of that realm of metalcore. Lamb of God, I think they've gotten better with time. That was Ashes of the Wake was actually one of the few albums that I first had. I always experimented with different music, and I mean, I don't know how you feel about it, but I feel like heavy metal or just heavy music, it's the most broad range of music out there, because
Yes.
I mean you've got like just every type of metal you could possibly think of, whereas in pop music is just pop music,
Right.
you know. And so I definitely explored all the, you know, different types of metal, tried to get into uh technical melodic deathcore and stuff like that, you know, like Dillinger Escape Plan was always one of my favorites.
Greg's absolutely incredible. I've always
Yeah.
loved his voice. It took me a while to get into them, but once you're into them, you're like,
Yeah.
oh, they're really good.
Yeah, exactly. It's like mathcore or something, you know. It's like people who really know how to play their instruments extremely well.
Oh yeah.
Um love Lamb of God though, and I think here's the thing though, with Randy, his vocals, I think he's just subpar.
Really?
He's good. Yeah, I think he's good.
Ooh, okay.
And I think he is, but I don't think he's doing anything that anybody else isn't doing.
Mm-hmm.
So he's not pushing the bounds, but he's like if you were learning just how to do dirty vocals,
Mm-hmm.
like he would be a good baseline to be like, that's how you do it, and that's how you do it properly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. I've always said, like, in the death metal stuff, I've always thought he was probably one of the best screamers just because of his range. But I could see where you're coming from with that. Now, best vocalist overall, I feel like Phil Anselmo probably takes that title,
Oh, yeah.
and just because like nobody even realizes like his vocal history. Like if you listen to Cowboys from Hell, you'll hear some of it, but then like if you go to, I think it's Metal Magic or Projects in the Jungle.
Yeah.
One of those albums was a one with him in like 1988. He could do the hair metal stuff. Like the song Death Trap was badass.
Yeah.
Like Pantera had like 3 or 4 albums that nobody knows about, but they were fucking killer. They just weren't the Pantera that we know today. But yeah, Phil, I felt like, you know, he could do the deathcore stuff, you know, with the screaming, and then, you know, let's say like more bluesy stuff with Down, and then even Southern Isolation, I think the band was called, where it was like an acoustic project with one of his ex-wives that was really good. And then, you know, obviously Pantera, Super Joint Ritual, all that stuff that he's done. He's just had such a wide career. But you know, kind of pivoting over to that, I was texting Tommy Salmons, if you know who he is. He runs the Year Zero podcast. You'll have
Not
to
off
check
the
him
top
out.
of my head. Anyways.
Okay, yeah. So I'll have to send you over some of his stuff. I was on his show a couple of times, and he's a real big metal fan too. Him and I were shooting the shit about Rob Flynn, and look, I love Machine Head. Like I think they're one of the most talented bands out there. That being said, Rob Flynn's a fucking cunt. So I was watching
the first time I've heard that.
Yeah. Not the I met him and Phil Demmel, Adam Deuce, and Dave McClain back when they toured with Mayhem Festival in like 11 or 12. And I think he became more cunty over time. But do you see kind of heavy music having this woke progressive problem? And I feel like Rob Flynn isn't like the worst of it, but he's definitely one of the more notable people in the metal community that represents that side of the culture.
Oh yeah, there's first of all, there's a lot of gatekeeping, which is ridiculous. That doesn't just happen in, you know, metal. That also happens in punk. And I think a lot of the, you know, the woke stuff or the virtue signaling type mentality actually bled over from the punk scene, because you have people like Fat Mike of NoFX, who's just a pure virtue signaler. And considering somebody who's called Fat Mike, who sings in a band called No Fucking Straight Edge, you know, like you would consider that maybe not aligning. But there became this idea of like metal, or like the metal community being like completely sexist and racist and stuff. And it's like, I never experienced that. Like, of course there's some like racist bands, but that's not indicative of just like the metal community. Like I saw recently somebody was trying to take Pantera down because, you know, they use the rebel flag. And it's like, God, you people are stupid. Or like the resurgence of Metallica with Stranger Things, and there was a TikTok video going around like showing all the guys from like pictures in the 80s before Cliff died and stuff, of them wearing like an Iron Cross t-shirt or whatever. And it's like that has nothing to do with what you think it does. You're just all idiots. So now I think there are definitely a faction of, maybe I could say like woke moralists, that are trying to point out something that's just not even there.
Yeah, well, what's funny is as I mentioned, I was texting Tommy about Rob's whole meltdown with Phil after a dime bash in what was that? That was probably like 2018, something like 2017 maybe. And like I went to Rock on the Range and I saw Down, and what Down will usually finish with is Bury Me in Smoke. And for nobody that knows, at the very end of the song they have like this whole kind of like build up, and then on the track it fades out and then comes back in, dun, 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 and it's a really, really cool part, and it's even cooler to see live. And what's cool about it is that they'll invite people from all these other bands to come out on stage. So there's like everybody you could possibly imagine that's at the festival coming out on stage. And one of the people that came out on stage was Vernon Reid from Living Colour to play a guitar solo at the very end. Like, if Phil was racist, do you really think they would be allowing the guys from Living Colour to come out and hang out? Like, and even Zach Wilde, who has a good relationship with Phil, said like, yeah, he goofed up here, but he knows that Phil's a good person and that that's not the way that he feels. So like you said, it's people pointing out something that's so ridiculous. And then even like God Forbid was huge. God Forbid lifted up so many bands. Like, even if you ask the guys in Trivium, they'll say God Forbid took us on our first tour. Trivium is huge now. And God Forbid, a band of literally all black guys, took out one of the biggest bands in metal today on their first tour. Now, you could maybe make some kind of argument that God Forbid didn't do well enough because they called it quits in 2012. I think that's silly. I'm sure there was more than just racism in that. But then even beyond that, Bad Wolves had huge success with a black guitar player from God Forbid and then a black singer. And I've always said those guys deserve every bit of success they get, because all those people in that band came from plenty of other amazing bands that never got the notoriety they deserve. So that's a long tangent, but I still love Bad Wolves with or without Tommy.
I mean, I believe the singer of Bury Your Dead is black now.
Well, he was there, but then he left, and then I can't remember his name, but he came
Bury
back.
Your Dead, changing singers. Oh my god.
But Mike Terry, and Mike Terry was fantastic. He sings for Volumes now, if I remember correctly.
Another great band.
Yeah.
It's as of like why there aren't like a huge population of like actually there's a huge population of Mexican people in the metal community. So like if metal was intrinsically racist, that wouldn't exist.
Dude, Il Nino is one of the biggest like new metal bands, and they sing in Latin, I think, not all in Latin, but you know what I'm getting at.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, well, first of all, look at Howard.
Yeah.
Look
at Sepultura.
Yeah.
Look at Sepultura. And yes, Derek's not the original singer, but they've had him for almost 30 fucking years.
Yeah. I mean, it's not all, white guys with blonde hair and blue eyes. And then there are a couple of like white power bands I've come across, but they're never popular. Everyone always fucking hates them.
Yeah.
Like they're just not a thing. Now, I would say, there's probably an issue within the black metal community. That's an issue in and of itself. Like some of those Scandinavian countries are kind of racist, and a lot of those black metal guys are.
But it's a whole different culture outside of America. Like that's a very homogenous country, and we don't understand that, right? That's not the American life.
Well, and it's not supported by anybody. It's not like everyone's like, oh yeah, these guys are racist, so that's why they're good. Like that's just fucking absurd. So yeah, there is definitely, and after this whole COVID thing, there's definitely this faction of people who appear to be rebels who are just not.
Yeah.
And they just go along with everything, I talked to David Sanchez from Havoc about that. I
Oh
had
yeah,
him on
he's
my
awesome.
show.
Mhm.
Dude, I love David. He's great.
Mhm.
And another, non-white person playing awesome thrash metal,
Yeah.
like, yeah, it's an issue that's just not there. But I think that that's indicative of just our culture in general.
Mhm.
Like, the millennial generation is like looking for their civil rights movement,
Mhm.
and there is none.
Right.
And so you've got to create problems. And
Yeah.
I think, like, that's just kind of where we are, is a lot of people are creating problems that just aren't there.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, people want to be able to tell their story of success or their story of overcoming oppression. So if you could find that dragon to slay, then now you have a story to tell and now you can lift yourself up in that regards. But yeah, David Sanchez, I was on, actually, speaking of Tommy a little bit earlier, I was on Tommy's podcast with David, actually, because we were talking about the music industry and the response to COVID over 2020. And he had an interesting perspective on people who play music talking about politics. And he said, I don't tell other people who have a different job to just shut their mouth and do their job. He said, this is now affecting my livelihood. So why can't I speak up about it? And even on the other side, if there's people who want to advocate for lockdowns, obviously we disagree with them. They should be allowed to speak about it too. But that being said, it's funny that a lot of people typically do just say, oh, you should shut your mouth and just play guitar. No, these guys actually have valid criticisms of political matters as well. Now, just because creative people tend to be a little bit more left leaning, you're going to see a disproportionate amount of people who play music that tend to follow the progressive narrative. But the ones like Ted Nugent, and not that Ted Nugent and David Sanchez are the same, but those guys who are a little bit more dissident of that, we should allow them to speak as well. We shouldn't tell either side to just shut up and play music, because these are people who are affected by political matters as well, especially over 2020, where these bands primarily make their income off of fucking touring.
Yeah. I think about the only person I would tell to just shut up and do their job is Corey Taylor.
Thank you.
I can't fucking stand him.
Mutual. Him and Dave Grohl. Fucking Dave
Yeah.
Grohl. He said, I told my daughter told me that she was scared when Donald Trump got elected. I'm like, shut the fuck up. You're like this fucking limousine liberal playing in one of the biggest fucking bands on the planet. And you're telling me your daughter's scared? Dude, suck my dick.
Seriously, like, you've been in Nirvana and now you're in Foo Fighters.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's just a couple of key people that like speak out that I just roll my eyes at. It's more of a joke than anything. Corey Taylor is one of those people. Plus, I mean, I'm not a Slipknot fan anymore after what they did to Joey, kicking him out. Joey was my favorite, so after that I was just like, whatever, that, and Paul Gray had died, so it's a new band now. It's just but yeah, it's interesting. I don't want to listen to Rage Against the Machine either. I mean, I would never stop them from speaking, is the thing. But I'm gonna talk shit. Like, fuck those guys. Rage Against the Machine, brought to you by Capital One. Like, it's
$300 tickets for nosebleeds.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know. It's I think we're actually in a sad state is creatively. Our culture is definitely like in a slump, and there's just this do what the machine says kind of attitude. And it's like, that's not rock and roll. It's not rock and roll at all.
Right.
And I don't know. I'm expecting the rebellion to come back really hard, though, because it always happens.
Yeah. So I want to get your thoughts on this as well, but I've heard, and I don't know that I've necessarily seen this backed up by any kind of data, but like the Zoomers, so the generation beneath us, because what year were you born?
92. So I'm a millennial.
Okay, yeah. So am I. I was born 94. They've said that the generation after us is much more conservative than our generation. I could believe it, but time will tell, obviously.
Yeah.
I'm almost curious. No, I am very curious actually about what this rebellion is going to look like. Is it going to be kind of like returning to tradition, or is this going to be something that we just can't fathom as it is right now? Like, so what do you think that's going to look like going forward? Are we going to see kind of like this more radical, progressive, but like hippie resurgence in music, or do you think it's going to be something completely different, like maybe a little bit more right wing?
I think we're going to see a little bit of both. So, I mean, I've heard from Zoomers, like the rebellion right now is, hey, let's go to church.
Mm-hmm.
I never thought I would hear that, you know,
Yeah, right.
like that's just wild. But
I am stoked to tell you guys about the show's new sponsor. I am now working with MTS Nutrition, which is a brand that I've believed in for a very long time, and they run awesome cells and they have awesome products. So I want to tell you about their amazing protein powder, which you're going to ask me how many pounds I have of the protein powder, and the answer is all of them. So here I got red velvet cake, 25 grams of protein, and they have the amino acids and everything on there, 59 servings. Peanut butter fluff, fluffernutter, 26 grams of protein, and then also the chocolate chip cookie, which literally has real pieces of chocolate chip cookie in there. So 27 grams of protein, 180 calories. As I've talked about on the show, getting your protein in is very, very important. So make sure you hit that link below and purchase your protein powder through MTS Nutrition. Boom!
There's a whole bunch of women now who are rejecting this, or soon to be women. You know, they're not quite women yet, but they're rejecting the idea of just sleeping around, having multiple partners, and just living this party lifestyle. So I've heard a lot of Zoomers talk about, you know, getting married, being faithful, having kids, and I've seen Zoomers as well, Zoomer girls talk about I'd rather just stay home and be barefoot and pregnant. And I'm like, what timeline am I on? Because this is just wild. But it's like a complete rejection of feminism. And not all of it is religious, is as well. So, you know, some of it is more of the hippie route of like, let's just get back to the earth. Let's care about people. Like I can have these certain opinions and also not be a fucking degenerate.
Right. Yeah, so that kind of speaks to like the Ron Paul revolution in a way almost. And it's funny because we were talking about this more towards the front of the show, but like Ron Paul kind of made it okay for a lot of right-leaning people to be okay with seemingly progressive issues where you could be this socially conservative boomer who hates war and hates that there's drug laws. Like these don't have to be mutually exclusive things. And honestly, I think that's a really, really good thing. I don't know that we're going to return to something like that, or I even hesitate to say return because we're always going forward. There's no real swing back. It's always going to be forward because what, you know, this perhaps what we would call return to tradition in, let's say, 2024 isn't going to look like, you know, the 1940s or 50s where, like you said, we're going to be barefoot and pregnant. It's going to be something else, but it may resemble that in certain regards. So you kind of hit on the feminism stuff. I feel like not a lot of libertarians really talk about this stuff as much as it should be talked about. Yeah. And we were talking a little bit off the air about how I kind of swatted that nest a little bit this weekend. But I feel like we should talk about these gender issues because they do matter to people, and in a political regards as well. When a lot of the programs in government are set up to strictly benefit women at men's expense, this is something that needs addressed, and it does change the way that we view intersexual dynamics. So what are kind of your thoughts on how we can address these social and gender issues?
So one quick note I want to make is that I don't think that history repeats itself, but it rhymes.
Yes.
So we'll see something similar as how things were, but there's going to be a new spin on it.
Right.
And that's in my opinion what rebellion will look like. And how we address these issues. Oh man, I mean, one of the biggest disparities I see is family courts.
Yes.
Like, especially in the state I live in, it's slowly changing, but just automatically siding with the woman.
Mm-hmm.
That is insane.
Right.
Some women are insane.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I love women, but there's some women I wouldn't trust with a 10-foot pole. I wouldn't trust with $1 to not fuck it up somehow.
Mm-hmm.
But that's the same with men too. It's not just a woman thing. But to automatically just side with women as if they are the end all be all is crazy.
Right.
And this whole idea of women can just divorce a man, take the kids, take the house, take half of his money. I don't know where that came from, and I don't know why society thinks that that's okay. All of a sudden a woman gets divorced and she just doesn't have to work or anything. She doesn't have to provide for herself. I thought we were talking about equal rights here.
Right.
That's a privilege. So one thing we can do is stop allowing female privilege.
Yeah, and this is something that really rubs people the wrong way because when you talk about gender issues, there are a lot of people who feel compelled to stick up for women, but as I kind of alluded to, when you swat that hornet's nest, there's a lot of people that want to throw themselves on the sword because they realize this is going to get them female attention. Well, unfortunately, that continues this whole cycle that we're kind of talking about here, where we sacrifice ourselves at the behest of women and at the benefit of women rather than being leaders, right? And this is really what women actually want. They want leaders. Yep. They don't want a man who's going to constantly sacrifice themselves for you. So like for all guys listening here, think about when you barrage a woman with text and you constantly text and you blow her up and you ask her if she needs anything. Think about when you suffocate a woman. Does she ever return that? No, it doesn't work. When you are overbearing, women don't like that because what that says to them is that you have no better options, right? So when you die on this hill for women at your own expense, they don't like that, and you lose, and now you just continue this cycle.
Yeah, women want men to be masculine, just like men want women to be feminine.
Right.
I don't want, the modern idea of a bad bitch or the strong independent woman that don't need no man. Not saying that a woman needs to be dependent, because I don't think an actually strong woman is dependent. However, these modern ideas that society has pushed women to be are very masculine traits. I don't want that in a woman. Like I have guy friends for other masculine influence and other and when I need testosterone time to be around the boys, like I've got that. I don't want that in my relationship. Now, my partner, my wife, she is very strong and independent of me. Like we're two separate people who just decided to be together. Right. There's things that she leans on me for, and I lean on her for certain things, just like any healthy relationship. Right. But I'm not asking her to do manly things. And in fact, she was telling me, she's like, if I could give up my voting power, if that meant that you had more voting power, I wouldn't heartbeat. And I was like, babe, that's fucking based out of nowhere.
Yeah, it's kind of funny.
Like, I don't want to worry about all of this shit.
Right. Yeah. My wife is actually relatively similar because she says, I don't really vote because it's just like I don't know enough. And it's funny because I don't know. I think I told you about Rollo Tomasi, and he's somebody who's really influenced the way that I think. It's something that should be noted that we're required to register for the draft, right? So in theory, we should have more of a say in how this country's ran because we have to put a lot more on the line. Now, obviously, there's not going to be a draft anytime soon or anything like that. Or at least we really, really hope not. But we have a lot more at stake because we have to go die for the country. They don't.
Yeah.
So needless to say, men also pay a lot more in taxes and then work a lot more hours. So overall, men, when it comes to government and how money's distributed, men have a much, much greater effect on that. Now, that's not to say that women are bad or anything like that. It's to just say that men contribute a lot more to that respect of society. Now, when it comes to raising the next generation and children and stuff like that, obviously women are primary and much more responsible for that. So it's just like we can't recognize these truths anymore. It's frowned upon to say these things, and as I've been talking about a little bit, it's frowned upon to call a failed relationship, a single mother, a failed relationship, when that is what it is. Is she a bad person? No, but let's recognize that as it is. Someone failed. You and I have both failed in relationships, I'm sure.
Oh yeah.
So
Plenty.
we could call it that, but for some reason, when you go over and introduce a child into the picture, now it's a protected class.
Yeah. No, that's bullshit.
Mm-hmm.
I know plenty of women who are terrible people who the father would have been a way better person for the kids to go with.
Mm-hmm.
Plain and simple.
Yeah.
And this isn't because it's, that's usually not a man versus woman issue. That's not, battle of the sexes. That's literally just, who's a good person or not.
Right.
And being a woman doesn't mean you are inherently good.
Mm-hmm.
Just being a man doesn't mean you're inherently bad.
Mm-hmm.
Like that concept, I think comes a lot from feminism, which modern feminism, like even the suffragette movement had its issues, but modern feminism is completely like demonic, for lack of a better term. It's just like straight man hating, woman destroying. It doesn't build women up at all. It tears everything down. And I think that's where a lot of that comes from, is, the bra burning, I free the nipple, like that benefits women somehow.
Yeah.
Free the nipple. Yeah. You're so oppressed.
Yeah.
You can sleep with as many people as you want. Yeah, that benefits women somehow.
Yeah.
Like, are you kidding me? It's a joke. And then not following through, because relationships are always it's a 2-lane road. So that means the woman probably fucked up somehow just as much as the man did.
Right.
Different relationship, different nuance. There might be more to blame on one side, but it is a failed relationship. And when you bring a kid into it, you do have to take responsibility for that. So that doesn't mean that moving forward, things can't change, things can't be better. But you also need to be choosy about who you're sleeping with.
Yeah.
Like, if that person's not going to make a good parent, if that person's not going to stick with you, you shouldn't be sleeping with them.
Yeah. Oh, wow. You just said something very offensive and revelatory.
I know.
I figured that out over the weekend.
Yeah. Yeah. Talk about a Twitter storm.
Yeah. Jesus Christ. All right, man. Well, we've been shooting the shit for a little bit. I have a couple more questions for you, and then we'll call her a day. What does liberty look like to you?
Liberty, well, first of all, it looks like very limited government, very, very limited ability for a state apparatus to come down and say, do this or else. I am all about voluntarism. That's my biggest thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I only want the government really to step in if there's, I want them to be like a referee, if they have to exist at all.
Right.
Which I call into question if they have to, but that's, my personal journey.
Mm-hmm.
But if they have to exist, they should step in like a referee during a hockey game.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. Otherwise, I want to be able to play the game and throw deuces if I need to,
Mm-hmm.
And liberty is really just other people getting out of my way to allow me to live.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's just the biggest thing. Not putting restrictions, as long as I'm not infringing on somebody else's way to live,
Mm-hmm.
So that's that's what it looks like. I can start a business without having to get a business license and comply to all of these rules and regulations. Not having to bow to somebody else's whim just because they say so. And that's what it looks like to me.
Nice. What does health look like to you?
Health?
Mhm.
Oh man, I mean health. First of all, just being in charge of your food. That is the biggest thing that health looks like to me. Coming from a agricultural farming background, I have a huge disdain for factory farms. Being able to grow your own food, although it's not necessary, but just knowing where your food comes from, being able to see it grow, being able to help it grow, really taking control of what you intake is like the first baseline of health. In my opinion, you get out what you put in, and there's so many toxins that we're exposed to through every possible means that taking control of what you eat is definitely the first line of defense as far as your health. And then beyond that, it's moderate exercise. Get out of the sedentary lifestyle. Go for a 10-minute walk every day if you have to. Lift weights. That's my thing. You know, it's not everybody's thing, but just do something.
Yeah. Nice. Yeah, I couldn't agree anymore. Where can everybody find you?
The easiest way to find everywhere I am is risetoliberty.com/links. That pulls up my Liberty links, and it just has everywhere you can find me: Odyssey, YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, Telegram. You can find me pretty much anywhere. Rise to Liberty or Rise to Liberty podcast.
Nice, man. Well, I appreciate you coming on. I enjoyed being on your show, and hopefully, the feeling's mutual here. And,
oh yeah.
You got an open invitation anytime, and we'll definitely do it again. So yeah, dude, if you don't got anything else, we'll close her out.
Yeah, honestly, I would just like to say thanks for having me on. You're always welcome on my show as well. And thanks to everyone that watches and listens, because without you guys, this would be kind of pointless.
Hell yeah, man. For sure. So you heard the man. We appreciate it. Make sure you like, subscribe, share, do whatever you can do to spread the word of liberty and health. And until next time, everybody, take care.
Later.